Okay. Let's just backtrack. In the mitzvah of B'yom Titet Schoroi, with the problem at the Rambam, he clearly has the gifts of Goy. We don't know exactly Mishnah Torah. He has a Ger Tosha. We also don't understand that either. The Chinuch quotes the Rambam as being a Goy. Okay, and the Minchas Chinuch just says, he doesn't understand what's going on. And there's a tshuva in the Chuta Meshulash, whatever it's worth, and claims the Ram at a different girsa, but then he should go from Ger Toshav to Goy in Mishnah Torah and Pirush Mishnayos. I'm not sure if a girsa would explain that. It might explain question how he learns the Gemara, but the question still is how the Pesukim work out. It's in the Chuta Meshulash Siman Yud Zayin. Say it. Now back here to the mitzvah of Achilles Poalim. If you recall, we pointed out that the Rambam uses the Arabic term of bikon, which literally means in the state of. And we also pointed out it is not a bona fide command. And we're never sure the command is on. We don't know if it's a key. We don't know exactly what it is. Okay? And he has this, as I pointed out, he has it by Mishmoros, Mitzvah Lamed Vov, Tmura, Neteravoy, and he has also, I think, Yibum Chalitza, but we're not sure exactly what it means, Yibum Chalitza. And in Mishnah Torah, he falls off on it. He says that the mitzvah is in the Balabayas. And it looks like a bona fide mitzvah. What I'd like to do is go over the Gemara Sanhedrin and the Reb Chaim and see everything. What exactly is the status of Achila by Goyim, Achilles Poalim, and to try to use this maybe to understand what the Rambam is saying, at least over here. There's a Gemara Sanhedrin and Zayin and Aleph, Vosanya ala Gezel. Gona v'gozo v'chein yifastoi v'chein kiyoitz b'nochi b'nochi nochi v'nochi b'Yisrael also, both cases b'Yisrael b'nochi muter. Okay, and then the Gemara comes to an option. Omer Rav Acher by Yaakov lo nitzcha el poil b'kerem. So the Gemara asks that the case of this brayso of nochi b'nochi also, nochi b'nochi and Benochi b'Yisrael also, b'Yisrael Benochi Muto is going on Pol B'Kerem. Amos, I b'shas Gemar Melocha Heteirahu. So it's Muto, there's no Gezel. I lav b'shas Gemar Melocha Gezel Ma'alihu. So if the Pol is b'shas Gemar Melocha, it's heter, and afterwards, if it's not b'shas gemar melocha, it's gezel ma'aliyah. So l'cheira, what it says is that a goy, a ben noach, who's working with noach, eats b'shas gemar melocha. Yusha v'chaim alevi, periches v'chos mila loch aleph, tigmas v'nira. And I'm just going to tell you, he adds. It's basically he copies from the Shiur of Chaim Alev above Metzia, which he said the Shumin Velosh. He just added one word twice, the same word, and I'll tell you which word he adds. I read it so. The poel ikar chiyuvoy mikle dovish b'mom u'schus. That he added the word schus. The poil has a schus moment to eat. V'afagav mishol shamayim u'ochel. Even mishol shamayim, he still has a schus and a din schus moment. Hainu de'ein lo yischayvus al balabayis. The shamayim means there's no chiyuv on the balabayis. Hanafkamina li'inyan li'tein li'ishel bonav. There's a chiyuv on the balabais from him, then he gives the ishel bonav. Okay. Avol hom mio di'esh lo rishus lecho. So he starts with rishus and then he ups it a little bit. V'zehavi din, and then he added this other word, schus momon. Din schus momon. V'rayil is there. How do I know that it din schus momon? Mehod the mavuvas and hejadaf nun zayin. You in Shom b'pirish Rashi. The way Rashi learns the Gemara, it's certainly like that. And he quotes the Rambam, Peri Tesel's Malachim, de ben Noach, Eitzel ben Noach oichel. Okay. The im nemo, the loy have rak mitzvah al bayis. If it's just a mitzvah, and he assumes al bayis, as the Rambam says in Mishnah Torah, im kain. The mitzvah will give it to your soul, not to Ben Noach. Elevade to have it did momon. Okay. Or hochi u'shenoig Ben Noach shehu b'chlal dinim v'gezel. Okay. So that's what he says. And in the Shiur b'chaim the schus momon, but he says like this: if it's a din momon, so it applies by Yisrael and Ben Noach. If it's a mitzvah, ba'almo, then it's only by Yisrael. So I wanted to use this as a suggestion of why the Rambam here learns that it's bikon, that since it's to be in the state of, and to be in the state of is this state of schus mamon, and in Ben Noach, it's only a din, and by Yisrael, this din, this exact din becomes a mitzvah. That's what I would have said. And the Mishnah Torah says no, that the mitzvah kilu is on the balabayis. You know, it's the schus mamon. The balabayis has to part with his mamon and not block it. Okay, mitzvah balabayis. See here, there comes a very interesting issue, because the Lashon Rab Chaim, let's go back and see what he says. He says, Bichlal dinim v'gezel. L'chayr dinim v'gezel, he's trying to say that according to the Ramban, it's one, and according to the Rambam, it's the other. And I'll explain to you what I mean. The Ramban in Chumash by Shechem claims that dinim is not to be done in the other mitzvahs, but dinim has its peculiar dinim. The Rambam in Hilchos Malachim says that dinim is just to be done on the other mitzvahs. But the Ramban says it includes various dinim, which you might have found in Mishpatim, which apply also to Ben Noach. He says, for example, V'al daiti, it's in the Ramban in Bereshis Lamed Daled Pasuk Yud Gimel. V'al daiti adinim shemonu lebnei Noach b'sheva mitzvah shelahem enom lehoishiv dayonim b'chol plach u'plach, like the Rambam. It's not all bilvad, not only that. Avot siva oisom b'dinei gneva v'ino v'oishek u'schar sochir v'dinei hashomim v'oines u'mefate v'ovus nezikin v'choyvel b'chavero v'dinei mal v'loiva. So schar sochir is also included by Ben Noach. V'dinei mekol mem k'gyoytz behen ki inyan adinim shenitzal v'Yisrael. So if it could be a din, if it's a b'chal dinim, the same way that the poil has schusei momoin for the schar, which is the balabais is mechuyev to pay him, you can imagine as din schus momoin for achila. Then I understand very well that the paradigm is this din which is said in Ben Noach, but in Yisrael, where the mitzvahs, this din, schus mamon, becomes a mitzvah, becomes a bikon. It's mamish beautiful. The problem is that the din schus mamoin, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, makes sense only in the frame of reference of God. However, according to the Rambam, there's no mitzvah of dinim in the way the Ramban understands it, but the mitzvah of dinim is loshav dayonim. So all it is b'chlal the mitzvah of gezel, okay? And the Rambam himself quotes it b'chlal gezel. So, and what's the din gezel? The din, the gezel, that the ben noach who eats, he's not chayiv. There's no necessity in the Rambam, in Mishnah Torah, to say that there's anything more than a hete gezel. And by Yisrael, it certainly is a schus mamon. And that's a mafurish in the Gemara. And that's where Rab Chaim came from, because the Mamba Metzia Tzadi Bezim and Aleph is like this. And Rab Chaim says, even Mishor Shamayim, it's a schus, and it didn't schus mamon, because the Gemara says, Mishor Shamayim oichel lididei zochi le rachmono. It's a schus. It's a schus mamon. And that's what Chaim was adding, it's schus mamon. But we don't know that, according to the Rambam, it's only b'chal gezel and not b'chal dinim, that there's anything more in dinim for ben noach than a hete. See, in ben noach, according to the Ramban, there are Zion mitzvahs, and all the dinim as a conglomerate is one mitzvah called dinim. And that's what Ramban says at the end of Shiur Yud Daled was nischadish by Yisrael that you machalik them into various mitzvahs. But ben noach, it's mitzvah achas. But you have the paradigm of a schus mamon, a poil fachila. So you could say Yisrael is exactly the same, but Yisrael, they're separate mitzvahs. But according to the Rambam, that it's only l'choyim ben noach, we don't know anything more that it's a hete mamon, because a hete on the gzela, we don't know that ben noach could be a paradigm at all. So using this Rab Chaim and the Achilas Poil as explained in the Rambam Bikon, I think is a mistake. Or maybe I'm missing something. So that is the way I see it. The Rambam basically says, you see, and also there's another problem. Which I don't understand exactly. You see, if you tell me that there's a concept of dinim by ben noach, so we basically say the backdrop is dinim by Israel, and ben noach also has dinim. It's just one mitzvah. And then you could say it's a paradigm, you can discuss whatever you want. However, according to the Rambam, that ben noach eating is b'chal mitzvahs gezela, the question is, how do we know this? Where does it come from? Because the Rambam says in Perik Tes, it was Malachim Malacha Aleph, על שיש דבורים נצטב עוד דמרישון, על עבודה זרה ועל ברכת השם ועל שפיכת דמים ועל גיל הרייס ועל הגזל ועל הדינים. אף על פי שכולן הן קבלה בידינו ממשה רבנו, there's an element to Kabbalah, והדס נוטה להן. I mean, rational. It's rational law. He says, "Bichlal divrei Torah yireh shal elu nitztava." So what? It's a drasha, whatever it is, but you can imagine that the hete gezel of poil b'shas malochi is allowed to eat. That's Mechal Divrei Torah. L'chayr, it's pure Kabbalah. Where the Kabbalah? And how did the Gemara knew this? It's an amazing thing. So if it's dinim, we can assume that the dinim are pretty much the same, unless we know for sure that it's something by Yisrael. So I'm just confused, B'chlal, how the Gemara knew this. And the Lashon of the Rambam, you don't see anything about its chus mamon by Poil. Perik tes halacha tes v'chus malachim. Ben noyach chayiv ala gezel. V'afilu Poil she'ochel shalei b'shas malacha. Ala kol chayiv. He doesn't talk about that achila. He just talks about the chiyuv gezel. So all you see from the Rambam is very simple. That it's the heter, mamon. So if all there is a heter mamun, so it has nothing to do with Yisrael. And Rab Chaim's comment, two things. Rab Chaim's comment in the Rambam that it's a din schus mamun by Ben Noach, I just don't get it. And the Rambam certainly doesn't support that. So I would say that the Rambam says a bikon because the Pashta did. And there's no tzivu in the Torah, and therefore it's a bikon. But this, which would have been beautiful, that it was a paradigm for Ben Noach, I think l'chayr is impossible. And I'm not sure how Rab Chaim learned that it's din schus mamon by Poil Ben Noach. Okay, I'm not sure if you can look at the Adrama in Sanhedrin, Nun Zayin and Aleph, and it's not clear for the Adrama that you can learn from the Gemara that a Ben Noach actually has a schus or het achila. Maybe the Gemara is only talking about Yisrael, and maybe that's what Rab Chaim was very careful to say. That he quotes Rashi and the Rambam for this, because maybe other Rishonim, it's not clear like that. But that really is irrelevant for us. Even if you accept Rab Chaim with the Rashi and the Rambam, there's no clarity that there's a schus mamon in Poil Akul. Okay, that was my Poil Ben Noach. That's my first point here. If you learn that the achila, certainly by Yisrael, is a din schus mamon, so then you can ask a question, and I think Achronim might deal with it, and maybe it shouldn't be a mitzvah nefredes, but it should be chelik of the mitzvah of schar poilim, of b'yom titin scholai. And say the mitzvah is din schar poil, and one of it expressed itself that he has to give the schar b'yomai, and it's a koil also the sina schar achilas poil b'shas malocha. So here you have to evaluate with the whole business of Shana, whether it was a separate parsha with separate dinim. How do you define whether something is part of a greater globus of a din, or it's separate dinim? That way you have to evaluate. But you have to look again in the mitzvah Kuf Yud Zayin, where the Ram says by Eilchin that they're 4 separate mitzvahs because they have different dinim. Just another flip and looking at this idea of bikon, that it's just being in the status of, being in the state of, you can imagine that there's no kumvase over here. And if that's the case, maybe that's pshat in the halachas gedolos, that he has no mitzvahs kumvase in poil. He just has 2 asholos. And but the achilas poil is not a mitzvah in his minyan, because his mitzvah minyan is kuvase, and since the bikon, it's not in the minyan because it's only a state. Now Ramban points this out in the end of Shiur Shishi, that the Bahag only counts kuvase. He is contrary to Shevi al Taseh. I'm saying even if it's not a Shevi al Taseh, even if it's something a little bit different than that, but as long as it's not a kumvaseh, you're not supposed to do anything, so there's no mitzvah. Now, next, the pasuk doesn't say we're talking about a shכיר. The Rambam in Mishnah Torah says that it's a kabbalah in Pir Shmuel. L'chayr it's a Pirush Mekubal. The Rambam in Hilchos Schiris, Perek Yud Beis Halacha Aleph, Hapoalim v'chulei, Hari al Baal Habayis, Mitzvah Shioniach Oison le'achol mima she'ein oisin, she'nema kisova b'kerem re'achol, v'kosuv kisova b'komas re'achol, mipi hashmua lomdu she'ein hakosuv medaber ela b'sochir, v'chi elu lo yisochu, v'chi ilu lo yisochu, mi hiteloi shiova bekerem reu bekomo shaloi shalom midaitoi elokein hu oime kisovo l'rishus bailim la'avoida tochal, and that's the pirush in the pasuk, pirush mekubal. And l'chayra, the source that it's a pirush mekubal is Targum Onkelos, because the Targum says titogav. In both kisavoy, in both times it says kisavoy, bekomas, bekerem, it says are titaga. And the Ram himself quotes this in Mitzvas Lois Reish Samach Zayin. He says, and how do you know it's a shכיר? He says, "Ukfa noida kizeh hakosav bo b'shכיר u'shaomu kisavoy yirtzavoy shenichneses socho k'mo she'oma ha'metargem arei titogar." And the Ram does this in another place, and I say Lamed Vov, when he's talking about Mishmaros, he says, he quotes the Targum, that is a Pirush Mekubal, about the Chalukas Mishmaros. So I guess the Rambam learns that to a large extent you might be able to bring a raya from Onkelos about a Pirush Makubal. The interesting thing is the Rambam seems to say in Mishnah Torah that the Yisod of this Pirush Makubal is the mashmos of the Korah. If he's not a poel, how does he get into the guy's house? What's he doing there? The guy's backyard or the guy's sada. You look at the Gemara seems to say it's a Gzeira Shava. In Omar Goba, I think it's a Peizayin. Omar Goba L'Choisov Kirisanya. Kisovo inema kan bia v'nema lahalan bia v'sovo lo b'shemesh ma lahalan b'poil afkan b'poil. So it's based on the Yigimel Midas of Gzeira Shava. It's not the way the Rambam presents it as a Mishnah Torah is based on the pasuk itself. This, and then we'll get to something I think even more today. I have just one more all over here, and then we'll see something here. The question is, what about a kablon? What about a kablon? So by Biyomo Titein Schoroi, the Gemara in Bab Metzia, I think Kuf Yud Beis, says explicitly that it includes Kabbalah. And that's the Ram and Schir is Perik Yud Aleph Halacha Gimel, not na b'chatzei yoyim, kiva sheshokol of Kamo oive mishum bal tolen. Shakablonis kischiris he v'chayiv lite bizmano. So the Ram doesn't say anything about kablonis in Perek Yud Beis Halacha Aleph. He only says poil. But I thought if the Pirush Makubal says that, what's the guy doing in the Soda? So he must be a Sochir. So maybe he's a Kabbalah. Under the same Pirush Makubal, you could also be Ma'abas Kabbalah also. The Minchas Chinuch without any Raya takes a double portion that the din of Poil Oichel in Tov Kuf Ayin Vov Sivkot and Aleph that it's said in Kabbalah also without any Raya. However, you can start asking the question according to Tesis. At the beginning of Sechas HaPoilim, there's a whole drasha that maybe Poil is bedafk in certain places, and it's not Kabbalah. Maybe over here, you could imagine that it's also Socher. Now, okay, now, yeah, okay, now let's continue. Okay, we'll see something soon, I hope. Okay, the Ram continues here, and he says, he says, the mitzvah is Shasocher Oichel B'Eis Avoidosoi Me'adov She'avoid Boy, from the thing which he's working with, Kishiyeh Adov Ahu Mechubel Oretz. V'hu Omer Yis'ale Ki Tov Ksovo B'Kerem E'acho V'Yachalta Anovim V'chulei Ki Tzovo Et B'Komas E'acho B'Kotavta Milas B'Yotech. וכפר הסבויר בגמר מציע, נגמר במציע, גמר מציע, כי משני אלו הכסובים למדנו שאדם אוכל ומחובר בשעת גמר מלאכה. From these two psukim together, we learn the din of mechuba b'shas gmar melacha. Ushelo yaspik lanu hakosav echad mibilti ha'acher. You need both psukim. Kmo shebi'alnu b'ma shekodem b'yomim ad sheyomu shnei ksuvim v'im lav le'shomanu. You need both. Hine mitzvah zu lomanu inyono mishnei ksuvim. It's a conglomerate of two psukim. Kloima, heter achilo l'sochir min ha'mechuba. Just 1 second. Yeah. הדרך שביאר מה שקודם המומם שכסובנו שמענו והנה זו מצווה עליונה משני פסוקים אלו קלוימה שמותר לסוחר לאכול מן המחובר, אוקיי? שמותר, אוקיי? או שהתר. See here, basically, you can flip everything around. And even though in the Baba Mitzvah there's a schus momoy, the Rambam here, even by Yisrael, says it's a heter. So maybe you could say that hetek zela, that bikon, that din to a matzav of a hetek zela was said also by Yisrael. See, once you make Yisrael a heter achila l'sochim and amechuba, so then you can equate the two. If you say that din moment according to the Rambam, I don't see it 100%. According to the Ramban, I could have imagined. Now, interesting. What are the two psukim together? Two psukim are like this. It is a tshuva from Rabbi Yeshua Nogid, and l'chayr is the pshuto shomiko. He says, "Mishneim lamadnu me'omam odem oichel b'mechuba b'shas gmar melacha oichel min hakosuv v'ochalta anovim k'nafshecha b'mechuba min hakosuv v'katavta b'yodecha b'shas gmar melacha min hakosuv v'chemesh leisonif kloima b'shas shechemesh b'yodecha when you the sickle that you're trying to cut the tfur with is in your hands, and you're using it to cut. The problem is the Gemara b'Metzia v'hashted nafkalo mechel mishmikoma kisova b'kem re'achalomali. So the Hashinafko Michel Mishimikomo, so the Ikal Limud is Chel Mishikoma. And the Gemara says that Kisova Kelmalomali, and the Gemara answers Hilchaiso. So the Gemara learns that it's a drasha. So Nicha, you could say the Rambam is working with Pshuta Shomiko and Sefer HaMitzvos Shomiko. But the Gemara is drashas. All very nice. The problem is, the Ram says, "Ukefar hisboye b'gemor mitzia." This is not the Ram's idea, but das steht in the Gemara. This is in the Talmud. Ki mishnei laksub lamadu shon mechuv mechuva b'shas gemar melocha. So how the Rambam does this, it says if shot in the Gemara, I don't get that it's true to Shemika and the Bishua no get. I can understand. So that, Rabbi say, is a problem. The word Gemar Malacha, the Rambam is a very interesting interpretation. The Rambam interprets Gemar Malacha is after the Gemar Malacha. As the Rambam says in Schir Perek Yud Beis Halacha Beis, V'oisim b'chuba going boitzer v'koitzer, eino oichel elo kisheyigmo avoidosoi. Kegoin sheyivso v'yitein b'sal ad sheyimalenu v'yinefatzeitz v'yinofetz, and it just bursts hasal, and he's taking it. He's taking it to remove it to a different place. V'yinafetz hasal l'mokom acher. V'yachzo v'yivso v'yimalenu v'eino oichel elo al acher sheyimale hasal. It's only after he fills up the sal. But Rashi learns that the het is even b'shas Gemar Malacha, b'shas Talisha. Rashi in Dvorim Chav Gimel Chav Hey Divrei Masel Keli Choloi Sitein, and Tosis Bezayin Man Aleph Divrei Masel B'Mechuba. Derech Agav, this idea of Shnei Ksuvim, and it's Pshat in the Gemara, is also in the Chinuch and Tov Kuf Ayin Vav. How you learn the Gemara, I don't know. Now, it could be that the Rambam is marich about these two psukim and is working very hard to make it into one mitzvah because he wants to disagree with Sadi going without mentioning his name. If you look in Rav Sadi going in his Sefer HaMitzvos, Perikah, page 45 and 46, for Esim v'chomesh lahati lepoil hakromim lecho ach loiloses. He's allowed to eat, but not to take away. So it's a separate heter for poil hakromim, for workers of the vineyard. Again, v'esir v'chomesh lahati lepoile hakromim leachol ach loiloses. Kenema kisov b'kerem re'acho v'chalta novim k'nafshecha sovecho v'elkerech olisiten v'esim v'sheish lahatir le'oisek b'zroim. It's not a kerem; it's a field of tvur or other zaroinim. Shenizruu liktoy biyod. He's doing hand till v'loi ba b'barzel. It's not with a metal instrument. It's hand picking. Katafta malilois. And maybe it's Rav Sadi going to Shitosai that he's cholik on Shiur Shvi, that there are two ways to Mekayim a mitzvah, way A and way B, called Pesach, Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheni. That could have been such a thing if there would have been a Kabbalah, or the Korban Oil of Yored. There's Ashiris, dollars and dollars, three separate mitzvahs. Various mitzvahs by Chatos, Amoretz, Parel Dovo, Shel Tzibor, Kapar Kohen Gadol, Kapar Mashiach, Sir Nosi, etc., etc. Similarly over here, you could do it in two ways. There's Achilas Poel in a vineyard, in a kerem, and there's Achilas Poel in the Mokum of Zriya. And the Rambam, through Shiur Shvi, makes these two psukim into one mitzvah. Then it continues. Ubebeya Omru. It's a B'tzia Peizayin, Perek Zayin, Mishnah Beis. V'elu oichlim min atera. So the Kapach translates with Feirish Omu, maybe that's better because the Chavona is to a Pirush Makubal. And Kilu is a Pirush Makubal, min atera, and that's the Rai min atera, it's a Pirush Makubal, that is the Ram Sheni, that the Lashon Teira, Gufe Teira, is a Rai for Pirush Makubal. So that's the Ram's trying to say. There's a Pirush Makubal, and that the Poil eats, and that's the mitzvah. He eats b'shas g'mar malocha. And then, l'chayra, you might conclude that only achila b'mechuba is min ha'teira, which is true to shal mikol, Pirush Makubal. But tolush is only a drasha. And you could support that Tolush only drasha because it's Parshas Chasima Shor b'shas avodah, and as the Ram says in Pirush Mishnayis in Bo Mitzia Perek Zayin Mishnah Beis, Imo Yadov v'shoevi Bo Tolush min hakarka yesh lo lechol b'shas malachtoi v'lomadnu ezeh mima she'omer Hashem leisachsim shor b'dishoy כמו שהשור אוכל בתולש בשעת מלאכה, כך גם הפועל. ורמז לכך אמרו לסחסן. ולא יאמרו לסידוש בחסויים. ועצם בזה שלא תהיה חסימו כלל, לא לשור ולא ליודו. So לכן זה דרושה, it's פשט חסימו, לכן זה דוד פועל, it's סתם דרושה בעלמא, it's not מן התורה, maybe. But it's a little bit odd that you see, it's like Chrife Kupadisa. You're cutting up the Mishnah, because the Mishnah says, Eilo oichlim min ha'teira, oisim b'chubel l'karka, b'shas g'mar malocha, u'b'tolish min ha'karka, actually nig malocha. So the goes on both. The Ram, because the drasha. So I don't know. It's very odd what he does. But this is what we have here. We have that it's all one mitzvah, and the Mishnah Torah, you know, at least in the Gemara, in Rab Chaim, seems like that it's a din zchus mamoy. Here we don't know that, and it's b'shas g'mar malocha, and it's mechuba. Now, I want to do something. And I thought about it, let's say, about 2 weeks ago. And I crossed it out because I thought it was nuts. Okay? I found the Ram himself says it. So I said, I have to bring it back. Okay? So let's start like this. Is it possible, the Gemara seems to be against it, okay, the Gemara and the Zionist and Hedge. Is it possible that the het to poil goy is lav dafka b'shas g'mar malocha? Because if you look at the Ram in Hilchos Malachim, the Ram in Hilchos Malachim does not mention when he's talking about ben noach g'mar malocha. The Gemara does. But the Ram doesn't. Listen to Lashon Ram, Perek Tes, Halacha Tes. Ben noach chayiv ala gezel v'chule afilu poel she'ochol sheloi b'shas malocha. He's chayiv, but b'shas malocha it's potter. He doesn't distinguish. He doesn't say sheloi b'shas g'mar malocha. So a priori, looking at the Rambam, you could have assumed that poel nochi ben noach is different than Yisrael. And a ben noach is b'shas malocha, and a Yisrael is only b'shas g'mar malocha. And it's an inyan miyuchad by Yisrael. Then, certainly, there's no paradigm. Okay. So, l'chera, it's mefuish the Rambam like that. The Rambam in Mina Mitzvas, Mitzvah loisase lamet, reish loisase reish samach zayin. Hu shehizir hasochir me'achor b'shas avoidosoi min adovo sheyavoid boy. Ki sheyavoid b'mechuba l'karka. V'omroi v'chermesh loisonif al komas re'echa. So it's an Isa for Sochir to eat b'shas avoidosoi when he's doing mechuba l'karka, and that's a lav loisonif. And what's the raya? He quotes the same. And he says, V'chelm, and he continues, Omu v'chelmish, Rabbis kol ba'alei chelmish, b'shas chelmish. Kloima, be'eis ha'kotzir, lo yisiksa la'atzmecho. But it's only Gemar Malacha. Ukva noida, ze min ha'kosu, bo b'sochir, kishomu kisovoi yirtzaboi, nichneses socho, kmo shoma targum areti toga. Okay, that we know already. Now the next line. Ubishvi mimitzia. Ubishvi mimitzia. Omu elu oichlin min ha-Torah. Oisim mechubel karka b'shas gemar malocha. So what does the Ram say? That the lav of a chelmesh leisonif al komas re'acha is mafkia the poil from eating b'shas malocha, shaloi b'shas gemar malocha. You only know gemar malocha because of the lav, and you understand the asharos of chelmesh, so you understand yourself that this is a peculiar din by Yisrael. The minyan of mitzvah kotzer. In Aseh, in Lois Aseh, Reish Samar Zayin, Shelo Yochel HaSochir, Sheloi B'shas Gemar Malocha Min HaMechuba, Shu Oiseh. And this he learns from the Chelmesh. And if you remember Reb Shua Nogi in his Tshuva, he learns from the Chelmesh that you can only eat b'shas gemar malocha. B'shas gemar malocha min hakosuv v'chelmesh loisonif. Kloima b'shoshe hachelmesh biyotcho ein haTorah shoyelecho v'zehu shas malocha. You understand yourself, it's mistaber the way the pshuta the Ram Hilchos Malachim. That a guy who doesn't have this lav of the chelmesh, there's no reason to differentiate by him between b'shas malacha and shas gemar malacha. And the din of gemar malacha is the peculiar din by Yisrael. So then it should come out according to this, that even if you can revive and resuscitate that the paradigm between Goy and Jew, and say it's only talking about not about a dinschus moment, but it's talking about a heta moment, it falls over here because the heta Goy is b'shas malacha, and the heta Yisrael is a peculiar din of gemar malacha. As you say, it's a paradigm and just a hafkor, whatever. That's what I would say over here. The chelmesh leisonif is the din of gemar malacha. The problem only is the Gemara in Sanhedrin seems to be foolish against it, but the Ram doesn't seem to quote. I don't know exactly how it happens, because the Gemara said, if you remember, Nun Zayin and Aleph, The Gemara says like this. Omer of Acha by Yaakov lo nitzacho el poel bekerem. Poel bekerem emas. I b'shas gemar melocha heterohu. I shloi b'shas gemar melocha gezel malyu. And l'chayra, the Rambam Rab Chaim, at least the way he learns it, it's going on the poel akul ben noach also. So l'chayra, it's limited to shas gemar melocha. Unless you say that what applies both to Yisrael, that he says, "I love shas gemar melocha gezel malya." Seems to be partial like that for everyone. I mean, it's just whatever it is. I think the Lashon Ram, the Loisa Aseh, and he's quoting the same member, the Gemara Psochim, that you can only eat b'mechuba b'shas gemar melocha, and he learns it out from V'chelmesh, a son of B'yodecha, and you have B'shua Nogid, so it's mistaber that the heter it's only by Yisrael that the heter depends upon gemar melocha. But ben noach, it's even shlo b'shas gemar melocha. I didn't see anyone saying this, but after the other Rambam and all the things together, even though I thought I was nuts, I think it's mamish dvom pshutim. Okay. Also, just this lashon, hete achila lesoche min ha-mechuba, is very much sounds like a bikon, which he has over here. It's the matzav that there's a hete or a schus mammon, but there's nothing going on. The mitzvah not incumbent upon anyone per se. We don't know there's a kiyum, it's just a het achila, the sochim and a mechuba. Okay, what I'm going to try to do now for the next few minutes is just to introduce this next mitzvah. I'm just going to read through, say a few things, and try to get us into it. Mitzvah reish beis. Ba mitzvah shtayim u'musayim. Hi shetzivonu lehorid hamasa me'al habehemo. S'nishyago b'maso b'derech. So we have to understand if it's only behemo, because in some places the Ram talks about odom. Is the mitzvah of p'rika, this is the mitzvah of p'rika, for behemo who's falling. It's a masa, and he just it's very difficult. You have to take it off. Is it only by behem or even on a person who's carrying a masa? Okay. Then the word bederech, is there any meaning? The word bederech, really, the pasuk when it says bederech was said by ti'ina, not by p'rika. And the Ram quotes over here. Is there any meaning for it? Bu'amo yis'ala kisira chamos hanacho loyvetz tachas masao v'chulei ozoiv tazoiv imon. What is? How do you translate the word ozoiv tazoiv? I think there might be a clue in the Minyan HaKotzer. The Mechilta just says that it's P'rika, but the question is, what's the literal translation? How do you get from Ozav Tazav to P'rika? V'shom nema Ozav Tazav Silamedu Shoiva Ala Sefer Aloisas Ekloima Shanach Nisavino Lifrik Melel Maso. Uzhanu Gam Ke Menich Oiso Vetzes Tachas Maso. Kmoshi is Boya. The Mitzvah said, as the Loisa said, and I said. The Minicho Vetzes Tachas Maso over Aseh v'lo Aseh. Shenema v'hine yizboye she'omru ozev tazev mitzaseh. Okay, we have to know where, what, when he says. What I want to do is just ask you a few questions. The pasuk in the Lav says Seinacha. The question is, what are we talking about? There's a Gemara in Bava Metzia that says that let's start the Gemara in Psachim on Kufi Beis, Kufi Gimel, something like that. The Gemara says that we're talking about a soine sonui, whatever it is, but he saw him doing an avei without Adam. So it's not only mutalis the soinoi, but mitzvah the soinoi. And then, but the Gemara Bava Metzia says that you mocked him the sone to the ohev kedei loku fes yitzchak. So if there's a mitzvah l'soinoi, what's kedei loku fes yitzchak? Tosfos talks about it in two places, both in Psachim and Bava Metzia gives two different answers. And the question is, what is the mitzvah over here? And what is loku fes yitzchak? If it's a mitzvah l'soinoi, it's kedai to look at the Rambam also in Shmona Prakim, in Perik Dalet, where he puts the mitzvah of Ozav Tazev and he puts Ozav Tazev and Hokim Tokim in the mitzvah that have to do, that breed midos. You look in Shiur and in Perik Dalet there and try to figure out what's going on and how this fits in with the Gemara Pesachim. Okay, and you should look also at the Rambam in Perik Yud Gimel. No, at the end, I think it's Perik Yud Gimel of Hilchos V'Tzeiach Shmiras HaNefesh. The question is, why does the Rambam put it in Shmiras HaNefesh? And the question is, what about the Seid over here? How does the Rambam look at this mitzvah? Another issue which you have to ask is what's going on with Sar Baalei Chaim. Because the Gemara in Bava Metzia entertains Sar Baalei Chaim, who we're talking about Sar Baalei Chaim over here. Is this the makor for Sar Baalei Chaim? However, don't you see in the Rambam, in the Shabbos, and other places, that Sar Baalei Chaim applies even without Pritah Uteina? The Rambam in the Nevuchim has a different source for Sar Baalei Chaim. It says that what he said is Omo, Sar Baalei Chaim Deraisa quotes the pasuk by Bilam, Lo Mekisas Hasoinecha. So in the final analysis, if Sar Baalei Chaim is a Deraisa, and the Gemara says it's Deraisa, why is it Minyan HaMitzvos? And there seems to be a simple answer, you could say, because only Sipo Ba'almo of Ritzoin HaTeira, Lo Mekisas Hasoinecha. The problem is, Rabbi Isai, that the Rambam Mishnah Torah in Hilchos Ovel says that v'achalti chatas hayom hayitin le'beini Hashem, which only sipo ba'almo u'tzoyin Hashem, that's the source of the mitzvah. So you see, if the Torah tells you sipo and psukim, it can be a source of a mitzvah. So again, Rabbi Isai, why is it Sar Baalei Chaim in Minyan HaMitzvos? Should have a nice week and Hatzlacha.